There are moments in life when it feels like everything is collapsing not around you, but within you, when people you trusted turn cold, when your loyalty is mistaken for weakness, when your silence is misread as surrender. They thought they were breaking you piece by piece, moment by moment, stripping you of your worth, your voice, your light. But what they never saw was that beneath the surface, something sacred was happening. The pain wasn't your undoing, it was your becoming, because what they meant to use against you, God was using for you. Every blow they thought would crush you was a tool in the hands of something far greater. You weren't being broken, you were being built. The fire that purifies, not destroys. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't just sting, it transforms. It arrives uninvited, often through betrayal, rejection, or abandonment. And at first, it feels like ruin, like the very foundation of your soul is being pulled apart, brick by brick. The people you trusted are gone, the things you built start to fall. You look at the wreckage of what once was your stability, your peace, your plan, and it's tempting to believe you've been forsaken. But what if the fire that came into your life wasn't there to destroy you, but to purify you? It's hard to see when you're in the middle of it, when you're surrounded by the smoke of confusion, disappointment, and grief. You can't tell whether it's a fire sent to burn you down or burn away what no longer serves your future. But in hindsight, you begin to understand. The pressure you faced wasn't random. The breakdown wasn't meaningless. You were being refined, not erased. See, not all breaking is the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of something unshakable. Gold must be refined in fire to have its impurities removed. Steel is forged in heat so it can carry greater weight. And you were walking through something that felt like devastation, but in reality, it was transformation. What others called a downfall, God called a rebuild. There were moments you asked why, moments you pleaded for the struggle to end. You weren't being dramatic. You were human. You didn't want to give up, but you didn't know how much more you could carry. That was the moment when something deeper started to take root. When your strength wasn't just willpower anymore, it was faith, it was endurance, it was resilience that had to be formed, not given. Pain has a strange way of silencing noise. It removes the distractions, the illusions, the temporary things we once thought would save us. In the fire, what was fake burned away. The people who were only with you for comfort left. The things you leaned on that weren't meant to last crumbled. But in that stripping, what remained was pure, real, and solid. You didn't lose yourself in the fire. You found yourself. The version of you that walked into the storm is not the same person who walked out. You were quieter but stronger, softer in spirit but unshakable in soul. What was meant to harden you only humbled you, and what was meant to silence you only made your voice clearer. People don't often see the growth while it's happening. They only notice the result. They don't know the nights you cried silently. They didn't witness the mornings you got up even when your spirit was heavy. But God saw it. Every tear that watered the soil of your transformation. Every step you took through the fire was accounted for. You weren't walking alone. You were being walked through it. So no, the fire didn't destroy you, it revealed you. It showed you who you are when everything familiar falls away. It introduced you to your deeper self, the one who isn't defined by applause, approval, or the absence of hardship. The one who knows that even in the heat of trial, something sacred is unfolding. Because the fire wasn't sent to end your story. It was sent to start a new one, the hidden blueprint of your pain. There are seasons in life when nothing makes sense. You try to connect the dots, but the picture refuses to come together. People leave without explanation. Opportunities slip through your fingers. Promises are broken. and you're left staring at the aftermath, wondering if any of it had meaning. It's in those moments that pain feels senseless, like random chaos with no greater purpose behind it. But what if that pain wasn't without design? What if the very things that seemed to tear you apart were secretly building the map to your destiny? It's difficult to grasp while you're still inside the storm. When you're sitting in the middle of broken plans and unanswered prayers, it's easy to believe that things are falling apart. You ask questions in the dark. Why now? Why me? Why this way? And often, the silence that follows those questions feels like a void. But that silence doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it's the space where something higher is working quietly, carefully, intentionally. Just as a builder follows a blueprint that others can't see during construction, there was a design being followed in your life. The setbacks were not signs of failure. They were adjustments, course corrections, hidden redirections meant to shape your path, not stop it. You were not being delayed. You were being aligned. Pain has a way of pulling us out of our illusions. We think we know what's best. We think certain people or plans are permanent. But sometimes what we hold onto the tightest is the very thing that keeps us from stepping into something greater. So when those things fall apart, it can feel like punishment. But it's not. It's protection, it's preparation, it's God rerouting what you couldn't yet see. There were doors you begged to open and they stayed shut. Not because you weren't worthy, but because what was behind them wasn't worthy of you. There were people you wanted to hold on to, but they drifted away. Not because you lacked value, but because they couldn't walk where you were going. What felt like rejection was really redirection. What looked like loss was actually a rescue. Every painful moment carried a thread. Each tear, each heartbreak, each disappointment was a stitch in the unseen fabric of your transformation. You were being built from the inside out, slowly, quietly, powerfully. And the blueprint wasn't visible to the people around you. They may have judged your silence, misread your struggles, underestimated your endurance, but the blueprint was never meant for them to understand. It was written for you, and more importantly, it was written by something greater than you. Over time, you began to see it. Pieces started coming together. The lessons you learned through pain became wisdom. The strength you gained through heartbreak became your foundation. The clarity you received through silence became your compass. And you started realizing that nothing was wasted, not even the nights you spent doubting, not even the days you walked in quiet resilience. Pain didn't break you, it built you. It gave you vision you couldn't have without the storm. It gave you depth you couldn't reach without the valley. And while others only saw the surface, you were being shaped in places they couldn't see in thought, in character, in spirit. So no, the blueprint wasn't visible in the beginning. It rarely is. But now, looking back, you can trace the outline, and it's more beautiful than you imagined. Not because the pain was beautiful, but because purpose grew from it. Because what they tried to tear down, God was drawing plans from blueprints that would carry you to a place no one saw coming. God uses the fall to teach flight. There are times in life when you fall so hard that the ground beneath you no longer feels like rock, feels like a pit. A place you never planned to be, surrounded by the silence of disappointment and the echo of questions that never seemed to be answered. You didn't see it coming. One moment you were holding things together, and the next, you were staring at the fragments of what used to be your sense of direction. And in that moment, you don't feel like you're being built or led. You feel abandoned, not just by others, but even by purpose itself. You wonder why things had to collapse so painfully, why everything you thought was certain had to unravel. But it's in those very moments, those valleys that seem to stretch endlessly, that something holy begins to unfold. Not all lessons come at the height of success. Some are only revealed when you've been brought low enough to listen, to feel, and to truly see. The truth is, falling doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes it's the only way we learn how to rise differently. When everything familiar is stripped away, you're forced to confront what you really stand on. And often, what you thought was your strength was simply comfort, but comfort doesn't teach flight, struggle does. It reveals the parts of you that had potential you never had to use. Until now, there is a strange gift in the fall. It teaches you what still holds when everything else breaks. It shows you what you were carrying that you never needed, and what you were lacking that you now begin to build. You stop performing and start becoming. You stop depending on what's outside of you and begin anchoring yourself in something deeper, something eternal, because the fall is not the end, it's the classroom. And in that space, God begins to teach you how to rise. Not just back to where you were, but to somewhere higher. He doesn't just restore what was lost. He reshapes your understanding of who you are and what you're capable of enduring. You start seeing your worth apart from validation, your purpose apart from applause, your identity apart from circumstances, and slowly, the weight that once held you down becomes the very thing that strengthens your wings. You begin to rise, not through force, but through transformation. You gain clarity that success never gave you. You learn how to stand still in storms, how to be calm in chaos, how to walk with dignity even when life hasn't been fair. Those watching from the outside might never understand how you're still moving forward. They saw the fall, but they didn't see the fight. They saw the collapse, but not the courage it took to rebuild. But that's okay, because this journey wasn't meant to prove anything to them. It was meant to teach you who you truly are when the world goes quiet, and you're left with nothing but faith. God didn't let you fall to break you. He let you fall to teach you how to fly without the crutches you thought you needed. And when you finally rise, it won't be on your own strength alone. It will be from a place of sacred knowing that even in the fall you were being held, even in the dark you were being taught, and even in what felt like the end, something higher was writing a beginning. So when you rise, and you will, it will be with wings you didn't have before, wings built in silence, wings formed in fire, wings that can't be shaken, because now you don't just know how to fly, you know why you had to fall first. Strength comes with scars. Not in spite of them, we often admire strength from a distance. We see people who carry themselves with calm, who walk with confidence, who speak with clarity. And we assume they've had it easy, that their lives have been smooth, their path well lit, their hearts untouched by pain. But true strength doesn't come from ease, it comes from endurance. It isn't found in the absence of wounds, but in the wisdom born from surviving them. Scars tell stories not just of pain, but of healing. They mark the places where something once hurt deeply, but also where something refused to stay broken. The world may rush past the surface, but those who have been through the fire can read between the lines. They recognize strength not by how loud someone is, but by the quiet grace they carry in rooms that once made them feel invisible. You didn't become strong by accident. You became strong because you had no other choice. You kept going when you had every reason to stop. You held your ground when it would have been easier to walk away. You faced storms that others didn't even see and still chose not to let them define you. That is not weakness. That is strength of the rarest kind. The scars you carry, on your heart, in your memories, in the corners of your soul that still ache from time to time, are not something to hide. They are reminders of everything you've walked through and refused to let destroy you. They're not symbols of what went wrong. They're proof of what went right, because you didn't stay down, you didn't stay bitter, you didn't let the pain harden you. In fact, real strength is not about becoming untouchable, it's about staying tender in a world that tried to turn you cold. It's the ability to love again after betrayal, to trust again after disappointment, to speak gently even after you were spoken to harshly. That kind of strength doesn't come from pretending pain didn't happen. It comes from learning how to carry it with dignity. Too often, people hide what they've been through because they're afraid it makes them look weak. But what if the opposite is true? What if the people who admit their scars are actually the strongest among us? What if vulnerability, when rooted in wisdom, becomes the very thing that gives others permission to heal too? You've walked through things others may never understand, but you're still here, you still show up. You still give, even when you've been taken from. That's not softness, that's steel wrapped in grace, and no one can take that away from you. Sometimes, the world praises a version of strength that looks like perfection. But real strength looks like persistence. It looks like waking up with a heavy heart, but choosing to move anyway. It looks like having every reason to give up, yet deciding there's more ahead of you than behind you. So if you're carrying scars, don't be ashamed. They're part of your legacy, part of your testimony. They show that pain came but didn't win, that hardship tried but didn't have the final word, and every scar is a reminder you were hurt but you healed. You were knocked down but you got back up. Because strength doesn't mean you were never wounded. It means the wound didn't stop your purpose, and now you walk not just with resilience, but with a story that speaks without needing to shout. A story written not in flawless pages, but in scars that shine with truth. Your survival is their surprise, and God's signature. There are people who expected you to disappear, not in a literal sense, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They saw what you were going through and silently assumed you wouldn't make it through. Maybe they didn't say it out loud, but their actions made it clear. They counted you out. They mistook your silence for surrender, your pain for weakness, your pause for the end of your progress. But here you are. Not only did you survive what was meant to silence you, you came back stronger, wiser, deeper, and your survival didn't just happen by chance. It was intentional. It carried the fingerprints of something greater. Because where others saw a dead end, God was crafting a detour. Where they saw collapse, He saw construction. You didn't just get through. You were carried through, rebuilt from the inside, and brought back with a clarity that only pain can provide. People rarely understand what it takes to keep standing when life has knocked the wind out of you. They see the result, not the war that happened in silence. They applaud the comeback, but never knew how close you were to staying down. And that's okay, because this journey was never about proving something to others. It was about discovering what was truly within you, and more importantly, who was with you through it all. Your survival confuses those who misunderstood your process. They didn't see the nights you wrestled with doubt, the mornings you rose out of sheer determination, not strength. They don't know how many times you chose to stay kind when bitterness was easier. They don't realize that your peace came at a price, that behind your stillness was a storm only grace could calm. That's why your endurance is a statement. It speaks without shouting. It declares that no weapon formed against you could prosper, not because you never bled, but because healing always followed. not because you were unshaken, but because you refused to stay broken. And in every moment where your hope was tested, something sacred was being formed in you, something unbreakable. You're still here, not because everything went your way, but because God made a way. He saw what others didn't. He heard what you couldn't even say out loud. And in the silence he worked, quietly, faithfully, powerfully. Your survival isn't just a testimony of your strength. It's a signature of his presence. There were people who left when you needed them most. There were chapters that closed before you were ready, but somehow everything they thought would ruin you only revealed you. And that's what surprises them now. You didn't become bitter. You didn't lose your purpose. You didn't let the wound define the rest of your life. You learned, you adapted, you turned the pain into wisdom and the silence into vision. Now you walk differently, not with pride, but with purpose. You no longer chase validation from those who couldn't understand your worth in the first place. You don't need to explain your journey to people who never stayed for the hard parts, because those who truly carry God's grace know survival is not luck. It's alignment. It's the result of being held when everything else was falling apart. So when people ask how you made it, you don't need a long explanation. Your life speaks, your peace speaks, your growth speaks. And the ones who expected your end, they now witness your rise, not for revenge, not for applause, but as quiet proof that God finishes what he starts. And you, dear soul, you are the living proof.